In July 2022, he was found unconscious and dehydrated near a dried swamp in Cambodia. This is his account. I had always been drawn to off-grid terrains, not for the thrill, not for any social media bragging rights, but because it was the only place I could hear myself think. That's why, in the heart of July, I landed in Cambodia with a backpack, a water filter, a compact drone, and a vague plan. Find the old forest trail that led to the dried swamplands rumored to be vanishing with the monsoons. What I didn't know then was how little it takes for the earth to quietly erase your path behind you. The journey began like any other. Local guides laughed gently at my insistence to go solo. Vendors tried to convince me I needed more supplies. And the air, thick with humidity, clung to my skin as if warning me to turn back. But by mid-morning on the second day, I had already lost the faint trail I was following. The trees grew denser, the ground softer beneath my boots. I should have turned back, but I kept going. By early afternoon, the terrain shifted subtly. I began to notice pools of stagnant water forming, the kind that shimmered deceptively under the sun. The ground started to pull a little when I walked, a quiet suction with each step. The trees thinned, and I realized I had wandered into an open basin, flat, cracked earth where the swamp once stood. It looked harmless enough, dry, silent, almost beautiful. I snapped a few photos and flew my drone a few hundred meters ahead to scope out the exit toward the other side. That's when I saw it. Movement. Not human, not animal. The mud itself, shifting unnaturally, as if something beneath it was breathing. I should have paused. I should have questioned what I saw. But curiosity pushed me forward. I stepped off the firmer edge and onto the deceptive crust. The earth gave way immediately. It was like falling into cold cement. The surface collapsed under my weight, and I sank chest-deep in seconds. My arms flailed instinctively, but the more I moved, the tighter it gripped me. It wasn't just mud. It had a pull, almost intelligent. Panic set in like wildfire. My instinct screamed that this wasn't normal. I remembered something from survival manuals. Spread your arms, lie back, breathe slowly. I tried, but it didn't help much. My backpack was too heavy. My boots dragged me downward. I struggled to free one arm and reached for the radio clipped to my belt. No signal. Of course not. I was alone. As the sun hung high and the horizon began to shimmer with heat, I knew I had hours, maybe less, before exhaustion or dehydration would win. I stopped struggling, saving my energy. That's when I heard it. Something out there. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. And not from any direction I had come from. I turned my head as far as I could. Nothing. Just the cracked edge of the swamp and heat distortion. But the sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was watching, and they hadn't made a sound since. I don't know how long I stayed frozen, neck deep in the swamp, staring into the rippling horizon where the sound had come from. Minutes? Hours? The sun was relentless, baking the cracked basin, and my skin had started to burn. But still, nothing. No bird calls, no insects, no footsteps. Just that one sound that now lived in my skull, repeating in memory like a looped track. Eventually, logic nudged its way past my fear. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe dehydration was kicking in. I reached again for the radio, still dead, and then awkwardly, painfully, twisted my body to remove the backpack. It slid off with a wet slurp, sinking into the sludge. Lighter now, I tried again to shift backward. That's when something moved beside me. Not fast, not aggressive, just present. A ripple across the surface, close. I froze, every nerve lit up like firecrackers. I didn't dare look down. I didn't need to. The surface of the mud, which had been eerily still, now bubbled gently in a slow circle to my left, as if something was circling me beneath the mire. Then I felt it, a faint brush against my leg, something alive. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't scream. Screaming would mean movement. Movement would mean sinking. So I held still and tried to listen, to feel. And that's when I realized the mud wasn't just clinging. It was breathing with me, expanding and contracting ever so subtly, in sync with my chest, almost like it was studying me. That's when I heard the second sound, not footsteps this time. A whistle. 3 short notes. Human. Intentional. I turned sharply, heart in my mouth, and this time I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the tree line, at the northern edge of the basin, unmoving, watching. It wasn't a rescue worker. I knew that instantly. No bright colors, no equipment. This person wore something long, earth-colored, possibly robes. Their face was hard to see, shaded under some kind of hood or covering. They made no move toward me, just stood there. And then they raised one arm and pointed to my right. I followed the gesture, scanning the horizon. Just more dried, cracked ground and a ridge of trees. I blinked, confused. And when I turned back, the figure was gone. Gone. I screamed. Not words, just sound. Panic. I shouted until my throat hurt, until the swamp echoed with the hoarse vibrations of desperation. But no one came. No other sound answered. The figure never returned. But something had changed. The mud was no longer pulling. In fact, with a gentle shift of my weight and a slow, deliberate roll, I found I could move, inch by inch, toward the right, the direction the figure had pointed. I didn't understand it, but I didn't care. I clawed forward like a worm, sliding one hand, then the next, dragging my half-submerged body along the edge of this quiet monster of a swamp. Every meter felt like a lifetime. The sun dropped slowly toward the horizon. Time meant nothing. I was covered in a second skin of drying clay and pain. My arms ached. My jaw trembled, but I didn't stop. And eventually, miraculously, my hand found solid ground, dry, cracked, and unyielding. I gripped it like salvation and heaved myself up onto the rim of the basin. I lay there, gasping, staring up at the purple sky. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just felt the silence press in, grateful that I could feel anything at all. When I sat up minutes later, I turned back to the basin to look, to make sense of it. But it was just a patch of dry mud now. Still, ordinary, empty, as if nothing had ever happened. No figure, no bubbling mud, no breath, just me, alone, and the sound of something distant now, softly whistling 3 short notes from deep within the trees. I didn't sleep that night. Even after dragging myself away from the basin and finding a patch of dry moss under a crooked tree, Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves jangled my nerves like an electric current. I kept seeing the figure,
Hearing that whistle, 3 notes, over and over. It wasn't a melody, it was a signal, and I had no idea what it meant. At some point, I stopped trying to make sense of it and just listened to my body. Conserve energy, slow your breath, stay warm. I wrapped myself in the emergency blanket from my pack and waited for daylight, hoping it would offer clarity, or at least distraction. When dawn came, pale and eerie through the mist, I noticed something strange. Footprints. Not mine. Just ahead of where I had collapsed. Bare feet. Clear, deliberate impressions in the dirt. Walking in a tight semicircle around me. And then, gone. No entrance, no exit. Just a half moon of human prints, as if someone had walked around me while I slept, and vanished. I stood slowly, every muscle sore, every movement cautious. My water was almost gone, my energy worse, but curiosity and something deeper, something primal, pulled me forward. I followed the footprints, or rather where they had pointed, north, toward a rise of jagged stone jutting out of the forest like broken teeth. As I got closer, I noticed what looked like crude symbols scratched into the trees, spirals, handprints, and long vertical lines. None of them were familiar, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me in their own way, guiding, warning. At the base of the rocky rise, I found something else, a woven bundle. It was placed carefully between 2 stones, half covered with moss. At first, I thought it was a pile of leaves, but as I knelt beside it and gently unwrapped a corner, I found food. Roots, berries, even strips of dried meat. Fresh. Left for me? I scanned the area. Nothing. Just mist, trees, the whisper of wind through dry grass. I should have been scared, and I was. But I also felt something else, a sense of being chosen. Not in some mystical, heroic way, just in the way prey is chosen by the hunter. Or perhaps in the way a test is given to see what you'll do next. I ate carefully, suspicious of everything, but my hunger won. The food didn't kill me. It gave me enough energy to climb the rock face. Not a huge mountain, maybe 30 feet up, but steep and sharp. Every handhold scraped my palms, every ledge threatened to crumble beneath me. But when I pulled myself over the edge, I froze. There, on the plateau, was a stone circle.
Not ancient ruins, not some druidic relic, just stones, large, smooth, and standing upright in a deliberate ring. Each one had a single marking carved deep into its surface, a different symbol from the trees, angular, almost like letters, but not from any alphabet I knew. And in the center, bones, a skeleton, human, old, weathered. The clothes had long since decayed, but fragments of cloth still clung to the ribs. Around its neck was a woven necklace, like the food bundle, and carved into the skull, above the left eye, was a spiral, the same as on the trees. My stomach turned. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, but I didn't leave. I don't know why. Something about that circle made me feel like I had arrived somewhere I was always meant to see. That this wasn't a random path, but one long in the making. That's when I heard the breathing. Not mine. Behind me. Low. Rhythmic. Human. I turned slowly and saw a person standing at the far edge of the circle. Tall. Thin. Wrapped in furs and bone necklaces. Their face was painted white with ash, except for 2 black marks under the eyes. Their expression wasn't hostile. It was expectant. They raised a hand slowly and beckoned. Come. I didn't move. The figure, Tall, still, draped in furs and decorated with what looked like animal bones, remained motionless at the edge of the circle. Only their eyes shifted, tracking every breath I took. The forest was silent behind them, like it had exhaled and held its breath just for this moment. I slowly raised my hands, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement, as if to say, I see you. I'm not here to fight. That seemed to satisfy them. The figure turned, walking slowly along the rim of the stone circle, pausing at each standing rock as if in silent communion. They never looked back at me, but I could feel their intention. Follow if you dare. And I did. Every nerve in my body protested, but my legs moved anyway, as if pulled by something beyond logic or fear. We walked, first through tall grass that clung to my legs, then into a narrow stone corridor carved into the hillside I hadn't seen before. The temperature dropped instantly. The walls pulsed with moisture. The ceiling closed in above me until I had to duck to keep going. Torches lined the interior, old, blackened mounts still clinging to burned stumps of wood. And then, ahead, a faint blue glow. Not fire, not sunlight. Something else entirely. We emerged into a chamber that looked like it had been hollowed out over centuries. At the center, a pool of water, still, round and impossibly clear. The blue light came from within it, not from any source I could identify. Surrounding the pool were carved symbols, more spirals, more handprints, but also animal shapes, wolves, birds, and snakes, dozens of them, circling the pool in a story I couldn't yet read. The figure finally spoke, a single word, in a language I didn't know, but I understood the meaning. Choose. I looked at them, confused, but they only pointed, first at the pool, then at the carvings, then back at me. This was a ritual, and I was the subject. I knelt by the pool. The surface didn't ripple. It was like looking into a glass mirror that led somewhere else, somewhere deeper. I saw my own reflection, tired, weathered, eyes wide with disbelief. But then the image shifted. I saw a boy running through a forest, crying, alone. Then the image changed again. A man standing at a crossroads, lost, hesitating, regret carved into his face. Then a fire, a scream, someone pulling away from me, someone I couldn't save. I stumbled back from the pool, gasping. My heart was racing. Sweat covered my palms. What the hell was this? The figure placed a hand on my shoulder. Not harsh, not demanding, but grounding. And I understood. This wasn't about the place. It wasn't even about them. It was about me. About what I'd brought with me into this forest. My fears, my failures, my guilt. This land, whatever it was, reflected it all back. It forced you to face yourself. I stood slowly, meeting the figure's gaze. I'm not who I was, I whispered. Not to them, to myself. They nodded once, then stepped aside. A passage behind them had opened. A doorway of vine-covered stone I hadn't noticed before. The figure didn't follow. This next part, I would walk alone. I stepped through the threshold and found myself in a grove unlike anything I'd seen. Bioluminescent plants glowed with soft purples and greens. The air shimmered with warmth. I could hear a low hum, like the forest itself was singing. And then I saw the markings again, drawn freshly onto a tree trunk. The same spiral from before, but now with a second symbol beside it, an open eye. I realized I had passed the first trial, not because I was brave, but because I didn't run, because I faced what the forest showed me. And now, something deeper awaited. The grove was unlike any place I'd known, not just in sight, but in sensation. The air didn't merely carry scent, it whispered with presence. Every leaf seemed aware, every blade of grass vibrated, not from wind, but from memory. I wasn't alone, not in the ordinary sense, but in the deeper way you feel when a space remembers more than it reveals. As I stepped farther in, I noticed the symbols changing. No longer just spirals and eyes. Now, animals, wolves, snakes, birds in flight, all etched not in stone, but grown directly into the bark, as if the trees had been born with the markings. And then I saw her, sitting, cross-legged, in the center of the grove, by a fire that burned without smoke, was a woman. Or at least, something that looked like one. Her hair was long and silver, falling over a robe made of feathers and vines. Her eyes, black, deep, endless, reflected the flames even though she didn't blink. Her presence didn't command attention, it demanded stillness. I couldn't speak. I didn't dare. She gestured once to the fire. Sit. I obeyed. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, or seconds. I no longer trusted time here. Then she finally spoke, her voice like wind through reeds. You entered the hunt, but you came without teeth. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if I was meant to. You saw the reflection, but do you see the beast? She placed something beside the fire, a small, bone-carved mirror. Its surface shimmered like the pool, but instead of faces or memories, this time I saw movement. Fast, flickering, a creature running through trees with a long, narrow body and flickering tongue. A snake. It turned suddenly, eyes locking with mine, and I recognized it. It was me, or part of me, the part that watched, that coiled, that struck when provoked, the part I had buried years ago, told to be still, to be silent.
The woman whispered, "You cannot walk both ways. Either you remember what you are, or forget what you were." She lifted her hand and opened it. In her palm lay a fang, long, curved, black as obsidian. "A gift," she said, "or a curse, depending on your memory." I reached forward, hesitated, then took it. The moment I touched the fang, everything around me changed. The fire exploded outward, not in heat, but in sound. A deafening rush, like 1,000 wings unfurling. The grove faded, the trees blurred, the woman's face vanished into a swirl of light, and I was falling, through mist, through branches, through memory, until I hit the ground, hard. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in mud, back at the river's edge. Same forest, same sky, same chill in the air. But everything was different. My pack was beside me, dry. My hands were clenched around the fang. The bite mark on my leg had healed, gone as if it never existed. But the symbols, they remained, burned faintly into my skin like a brand. And I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the tree line, I heard the unmistakable sound of scales shifting across bark, a hiss, a low growl, not threatening, watching, waiting. I stood slowly. The forest didn't seem hostile anymore. It seemed awake, like it was waiting to see when I would do next. And for the first time, I felt no fear, only understanding. The hunt wasn't meant to end. It was meant to awaken. The forest didn't speak in words, but it no longer needed to. Each step I took echoed not with sound, but with memory. Footprints layered atop those of the one I used to be. I had returned, yes, but I wasn't coming back as the same man who'd crossed the river days ago. I knew now that the trail had never truly been about finding a path out. It was about tracing the trail in to something deeper, darker, older. For days, I walked in silence. The fang stayed close to me, tied in leather around my neck. The symbols on my skin had not faded. They shimmered slightly at dusk, like the forest still breathed through them. My senses were sharper, colors richer, time slower. Sometimes I could smell a deer miles away. Other times, I knew where the rain would fall before a single cloud appeared. But I didn't speak of it, not even to myself. Some things lose power when spoken too soon.
On the fifth night, I found the clearing again, the one where I'd first felt the shift in the air, where the silence had pressed in like a question with no language. But this time, something had changed. The stone was back, only now it was no longer covered in moss. The carvings were clear, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Eyes, snakes, rivers, stars. And at the center of it all, a man kneeling, his head tilted back, mouth open to the sky, as if waiting for something to enter or leave. I stepped closer. The air around the stone buzzed, like the static before lightning. And then I saw it. In the reflection on the stone surface, not my face, but hers, the woman from the grove, still, her eyes, watching, and then gone. In that moment, something shifted in my chest. Not fear, not awe, a realization. I hadn't escaped the hunt. I had become part of it. It wasn't something you fled. It was something you joined, willingly or not. The forest hadn't tested me out of cruelty. It had offered a choice. Stay asleep and survive, or awaken and remember. Remember the part of myself that wasn't civilized, the part that didn't ask permission, the part that knew the way not by compass, but by instinct, the part that had always heard the whisper of the trees and simply chosen to ignore it. Until now. I stayed in the clearing until dawn. When the sun rose, the stone no longer glowed. It just was. Silent. Still. Present. I left a mark on it. Not with carving, just with blood. A small cut on my palm pressed to the stone. An offering. A signature. A vow. Then I turned and walked, east this time, back toward the river, back toward people. But something told me I wouldn't be one of them again. Not entirely. Weeks later, when I finally reached the edge of civilization, a ranger station, remote and weather-worn, the man there looked at me like I was a ghost, said I'd been reported missing for nearly a month. I didn't correct him. He offered food, warmth, a call to authorities. I accepted the warmth. The rest, I let pass. When they asked where I'd been, I gave them the only answer that felt honest. I got lost in the forest. No one questioned it. Who would? But I wasn't lost. I never had been.
Not really. I had been taken in, and then let go, but only after remembering, not just the forest, not just the symbols, but myself.